All right. Okay, guys. So let's start our Trainers Corner today. And this is like a completely, I mean, it's not random, but a bit random conversation that arrived from a BTS post on our private trainers group. And it led to an interesting discussion that was about, what was it actually about? And what actually what started the whole idea was what Eva said about the thing how about in essence that we should teach each body part where it should be, and this was a great start of a conversation, and the fact that this is like a Zoom conversation type. So here we are, and we are going to talk about that we should teach each body part where it should be. So who wants to start?
Well,
Vidya, couldn't you start with the example that we were discussing to begin with? I think that's a good place to start.
Let's do that. So this came about because I have a student on Tromplo who has a dog who is very busy, right? So it's a dog who offers a lot of behavior. It's wonderful to work with, but at the same time, what we're working on at the moment is to create a clean indication behavior, and we were working towards a clean paw target. Now, the dog had a very nice paw target, but what she also had was a nose target with it, kind of a searching kind, there were behaviors around the paw target that it would have been nice to not have from a perspective of a clean loop, and things like that. So this is what we started talking about it with my student, and then I posted her video in the Tromplo Trainers group saying, here are some of my ideas, guys, but how would you go about teaching a clean paw target? Can we talk about it? And I can kind of brainstorm with you guys, go back to her as well with more than one person's knowledge. So that's the background. So if we say, would it be worthwhile to say that we can use an example of teaching a paw target? And at that point, Eva replied saying, you teach each body part where it should be. So that's what I've got. That's the context. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I think it makes perfect sense. Much better sense than what I said. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because this dog from the target, the paw target, was accompanied by all those other behaviors. And I think this is something we see very often, actually, that it's very hard sometimes to get this clean loop because the animal has a lot of history of other behaviors associated to the environmental cues. And those are being evoked by those cues happening in the environment while we teach another behavior. And then it may be difficult to like just dissect this only one we want and how to approach it, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes we focus on the part that we want, which is a good idea. We focus on, so we want a paw target, we focus on the paw target. But if we in that process forget that the rest of the dog's body parts are learning as well, it may become tricky to disentangle that later. So if we get some extra body parts moving, which we would rather want to be still, or we get some other body parts being stationary that we would rather have moving, it can be much harder to sort it out later on. Mm-hmm. Often easier to get it all reasonably sorted early on.
Yeah. So I was thinking when I read your reply on teaching each body part where it should be, I was thinking that would be interesting, like how to teach, because we could do like the bucket game where the dog has his head staring at something, but we would still want the dog to be able to know what he was touching. So my first thought when I saw all the wonderful replies in that thread was to start a new behavior. For instance, like a starting with a platform where it's not likely the dog will put his nose down, then making it only a 2 feet platform, until we have this behavior where we get a lot of reinforcement history for keeping the head up while only touching with the paw. But the thing where we select the head up behavior, does anyone has any suggestions how to do that? Because the only thing I could come up with was actually target, or like a freeze behavior, like the bucket game, staring at something. But I didn't really see how the dog should still be able to orientate where it's puts his
See,
paw.
the kind of scope of what I was expecting, right, when I posted it, and this is why what Eva said, which is teach all the body parts. I was like, what? But the thing that I was kind of expecting when I went in was going, as some of the things that we talked about, Eva, was, how can I set up the environment in a way that it is just not likely? It is just like, so for example, like what we were talking about with the 2 paws up behavior, or we were, the one that I actually loved the most was teach it through a fence. I thought that was just sheer genius, because that it is impossible, right, for the nose to come into contact and so on. But then you have to think, okay, in this case, that works because this particular dog has a reinforcement history, a click history of getting her nose and the paw together. What if it's something else? What if the dog pivots? That you can have all kinds of behavior associated with the one that you want to isolate. So the way that my mind was thinking was all around like antecedent arrangement in like almost a physical sense, or asking for another cue, which the dog might maintain, and asking for this cue as well. But all of that gets really complicated, I think, which is why what was really interesting to me, Eva, that you said teach each body part separately. So how would we go about doing that?
So I would be thinking that there is a sequence of behaviors in when a dog touches a target with its paw, and doesn't put its nose on it. So what does that look like? There would be first some kind of visual orientation. So I would want the dog to look for the target, just as you're saying. So we want to have look for target, approach target with paw, and still keep distance with nose. So the paw goes down while the nose goes up. I think if we see that as a sequence, that would be one possibility of just mixing back and forth between sessions of just standing head up and possibly, okay, let me do this.
Oh, I love that. I knew it.
And he's been carried around by a spaniel, and then he was in the washing machine, so he's a bit rugged at the time. But if he can go in, look, paw, nose up, he would be, if we can get a bit of this behavior going, that would be nice, huh? So if I can just do one session of click treat for nose up, or just click treats for nose being still up here, and then do one session with the paw target and reward delivery that resembles the reward delivery that we did for the head up session. So there are other aspects within the session that reminds of the head up session. So you do one head up session, starting point up here, reward delivery up here, and then you do a target session, starting point up here, and again reward delivery up here. That I would expect make it more likely that I can get the paw with the head up. But it's also the case, I think, of what do I do if I'm late? So if I'm looking for look, paw, nose comes down. Well, if I can reinforce earlier on in the cycle, so look, paw, before the paw really reaches, if the nose is still at a distance, I can click and reinforce high. So
but didn't it look like in the video that the dog was doing it like simultaneously?
Yes. But
he was actually touching like with the nose and the you can see nose and paw at the same time. So we would somehow have to separate the behaviors.
See, but then what makes a lot of sense is to create the environment in a way that you get a sequence, right? So I think in that scenario, it was free for all. It was like free access, right? So the object is freely available. So let's describe that a bit clearer. So the handler is sitting here, like where I'm sitting on a chair. The object is on the floor on a mat. So, and she holds it a little bit, so it's not going to run around as much. And the dog is in front facing her, right? So on the floor. And this is the sort of environment. The dog has a strong reinforcement history of a down station behavior, right? So we've been building that as kind of a base position as well. And then I think there's a bit of a shaping session happening, but then there's a huge reinforcement history for a base position, right? So for a down behavior, we call it a base position, but for the dog, she's offering a down. Yeah, so that's kind of what it is for her. So what made sense to me then in that thread that we were talking about was what Mikołaj, you said, which is, can you, if you know, the pause up, you know, that sort of thing where you are more likely to get the pause up first and you click then before the nose comes in. That made sense, right?
So I thought about having a stool or something like a step and putting first reinforce that stepping onto it, and that gives us the paw movement because dog has to leave his paw, put it on, waits you forward to step on it and gets reinforced on it, or gets reinforced back and steps off. And then we got a visual cue for something connected with paws, but because before we got only something to do with this behavior we actually had at the moment. So we had new cue for it, build the reinforcement history for paw movements, and then add this on top of that. And what I was thinking is that we will get the paw movement just stepping on it while the target is there, and dog will step on it. But the problem with that I saw in my head was that pretty much there will be quite a lot of extinction because there will be two behaviors that were heavily reinforced, and I can see the dog trying to just stick a nose onto it because it's higher, it's more unbelievable.
Yes.
Nose target, but at the same time there is a step that the dog was reinforced for, so it was either touch with nose or step on it, and it could get us the behavior, but I wonder if that wouldn't be too messy. It would be hard to get the clean loop with that step idea, I think.
See, this was actually my question as well off the back of the pause up behavior. If I thought of the other way around, so let's say I had a dog who was offering a paw target behavior when we actually want a nose target behavior. It feels natural to me, I think, at that point to raise the target, right?
Yeah.
Because you make the closer to nose, right? So then actually you're creating that sequence where the nose comes first and you can get in there. You can kind of click at that point and build from there. So my question is it intuitive or counterintuitive to raise the object, to raise the item?
What about more steps? Like we thought about one and it's on the level of head, but if we get more, we can just do step, and step with the target, and then there's the initial idea for touching that because it's out of range. Yeah, maybe something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but if couldn't we do like a target transfer too? I don't know. If we do if the dog knows paw behavior, like one hand, so we could reinforce that quite a few times. We could lower our hands. We could hold our hands over the desired target, in this case, this blue thing, and see how gradually we should lower it to not get the nose. And then gradually remove our hand to see if we could get a clean paw behavior from that.
We'll fade out our hand, right?
Sorry?
We will fade out our hand.
Yeah, fading out so we'll just start with the paw target and then Yeah, do a target transfer and fade out the hand cue.
Okay,
And you could also, oh, sorry, Aga, you first.
I wanted to say that Eva, you wanted to say something for a while.
I would just want to stay on Mikołaj's step up behavior a little bit longer, because I thought that was like super cool. Just because my first thought was, why would that help? You know, I was just in the aspect of, well, if the dog is here and there is something here, why wouldn't he go with it with his nose first? And then I tried to look at, well, what does it look like when a dog steps onto something? I have never seen a dog climbing stairs or stepping onto a high stool with his nose down here and then stepping on with his front feet and trying to get up. It doesn't physically work. So somewhere in the stepping up, if it's high enough, he's going to push with his back and his nose is going to come up. So if we look at the movement cycle of stepping up onto something that's reasonably high, there's going to be a moment of nose up. And talking about the reinforcing each body part, if we can set it up so that there is a fluent loop of step up with your feet, then we can click for the nose position. So we stop clicking for paw position and click later in the loop. So you get paw, push, and in the push you get the nose.
But you
So
mean
I'm not
when
gonna
you
click
have
for that anymore.
But you mean when you already have a behavior? I have my assistant from Catja. So you have this target here, and you've already built a reinforcement history for this behavior. And
while you're teaching it, what does the full loop look like? Where are you reinforcing and how are you resetting?
Okay, this is my question actually. So my dog, do I start by simply charging the behavior here? So this is my start position. I'm going to lure my dog right here, and then I'm going to deliver one treat a little bit so that my dog has to take a step down while taking the treat, and then immediately it's going to be easy for him to go back, right? Because it's going to be just one tiny step, and then I'm going to click and I'm going to deliver here. So this is one way to do it. The other way, maybe click and reinforce right here and build some duration of standing right in here, and then working on his head position.
Yeah. Or one might be, if you have a large enough object to step on, like a big box or a stair, of just start from further distance, shape the nose movement. So if this is the object, start here, starting point, click, treat, click for nose pointing ahead, treat, no click for nose down, click for nose up, treat, click, treat, click, treat, click, treat. So you're sort of shaping this path that goes up here. And if then, because this is an agility thing, if you can get the black dot and at the front of the dog going in the direction you want it to, the rest of the dog will follow. So you're going to get feet. If we just get the nose going where you want it to, you're going to get feet eventually. And then we can be sure to get the nose where we want it to be, because as soon as we start focusing on feet here, there is a risk of this happening without us sort of noticing or having much to say about it. But if I'm shaping the nose movement, and I just let the feet follow, because the dog can't keep his feet back here if his nose is going that way.
So when you say agility, we could actually put it as high as if the dog is fit. So he would kind of have to jump up to, for instance, a small table, and we could click when he's up there with head up, because he would not be able to have head down while he's jumping. Naturally, when he lands on the plateau, he will naturally look up at you.
Yeah. Or you can just click and treat for going upstairs.
Yeah.
But is it not that we are focusing? There are two things that we are focusing here. One is to use some sort of an incompatible behavior. So make sure that what we don't want doesn't happen. Doesn't have a play, like there is no option for what we don't want to happen. And the other is what Eva said, so that we should be working on each body position, each body part have a, teach where it should be. So we are putting those two together, right? in this example?
For a trainer's exercise, I would say that we should be able to do that. It's like, it might not be the quickest path, but if I have that in my toolbox, then I can, whenever you need to, you can sort of pull that card out. So if we just put the target back on the ground and we have this dog that now goes with both his foot and his nose simultaneously to the target. If we don't alter anything, we just start from here, but we start at the starting point where the nose is up, and we teach some nose up over here. And then we let the target behavior resurface, but we get the movement cycle with the old target behavior, but we click and treat for the nose up. So sort of get this movement going with the paw, but most of your clicks will be for the nose.
But at what point in that sequence would you make the paw target the salient part? So if I am clicking for a nose up behavior, which is what you want to teach first, and you are coming closer to the object, and you can start with a neutral object where there is no history of that behavior happening and things like that. At what point and how would you make that about the paw target for the dog to realize, well, the object is the salient piece of information as well, not just where my nose is?
My first go-to would be to do parallel sessions, like for me personally. So one session of just head movement, one session of focusing on the paw target. But when doing the paw target session, having starting points and having reward deliveries and having criteria that don't get where you don't get the nose going as much. Click sooner, basically, and then sort of alternate between the sessions. Another thing that's kind of fun to do, and that would be in my preference of doing, is to give the dog a starting point, if possibly with the nose low, so nose by the paw. So I get a starting point here, because then I can click for nose up. So building a history of doing this. So if your nose is close to your paw, you bring it up, because then if I get paw and nose down, I'm a lot more likely, if I just withhold my click, to get a resurgence of nose up.
And then you can build duration of that behavior of, nose up, right? If you want.
But then wouldn't you also have this loop of the dog going simultaneous down, up?
Yes,
which is actually what this dog does. So she goes, that's kind of what she does as well. So how can you do that?
From her current starting position, at what point is the nose and the paw still separated?
At the moment, unless we watch it in slow-mo, which I have not watched it in slow-mo, but if it almost looks concurrent, right? But I think we can make changes like what we've talked about, like step up and things like that, where I think there are very clear ways for the paw movement to happen before the nose movement. But right now, it almost looks concurrent.
So if we were to just leave the setting just as it is, here is the dog, here is the target, and what happens is these both go boom at the same time. Here, while the dog is eating a treat, the nose is up. So if I just let the target be there, click and treat before the dog has time to move, just to get some history in on this, might that give some delay, or might that give some variation in this behavior? If I just do sessions with the target, with everything out there, just click and treat for nose up 10 times, and then see what we get the 11th.
I'm just watching the video of the dog. Sorry, like the one.
Did you want to? Yeah. No, I understand.
I wanted to see, like, right now, when does this lowering?
Aga, couldn't you share that?
Hold on, this is really high-tech thing for me to do. So hold on a
It
second.
seems like when you watch the video, it seems like taking the treat, when she throws the treat at least, walking 2-3 steps with head and paws separated, and then the movement, like half a meter before the target, they start to become one movement. It's what
I
it looks
think it also, so much of that behavior was interesting to me because...
I can.
Oh, excellent.
Can we
Excellent.
do
Let's.
that? But is she comfortable with your student? Is she okay with it?
Could we do it differently? Could we talk around it, and I will check with her if it's okay to share widely rather than sharing now?
because
And then if she's okay with that, we can put that up in the notes or something like that. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
and because I I don't want to share something that she may
Yes,
not,
yes.
not okay with. So
Yeah. So let's check, and if she's happy with it, then if it's all right to share a link in the notes or something like that, if that's okay with her as well.
okay.
So could you describe the starting point if the target is here?
Just hold on. I'm gonna see where she. Okay, she tossed the treat right now, and the dog is actually walking. I'm gonna be a dog right now. So, or no, he's gonna be a dog. So she's starting more with her head down. So she gets a treat right here, right? And then, yes, and then she's coming back with her head, sorry, with her head. Head is going
Just slightly
first,
disturbing, very slightly disturbing.
and head is going first, and head is low all the time. So then she comes actually first. I have a screenshot right now that head is on the target and paw is not yet on the target. So
But-
the head is first actually to come to a target. Then she does this. Hold on. Yeah, then she does this. I know this is disturbing. So she comes like this. Then
Yeah,
she has
reaches
her,
over.
yeah, she reaches over and then she lifts her head.
Yes,
She lifts her
does.
head after the click usually.
But have you seen there are repetitions in the middle when she's the handler, so she's not resetting, right? So the resets for this dog, the resets are very disruptive to her sequence, yeah, in the sense, but later on, I don't know if you're watching the bit that comes later where she's sitting down already, you get much tighter, neater behaviors, but there is still the nose target in the top, nose target in the top.
But what changes in the middle right now, I'm watching it, is the dog is laying down.
Yes.
He's doing it from a down position.
Yes.
And what you have is the head is not, the head is actually in a better position because she feeds her, where's my assistant? So she feeds her, she's in down, let's say he's lying down, and there is a paw and the nose, and then the livery is right here.
Yes, she feeds up, and that really helps.
This is a position, this is a start position for the next repetition, right? And but then her head is also closer to the target when she's in the down position. So the movement, it's like a little movement. So I think the whole setup should, from my perspective, it would be that this setup for her when the target is in this location, it's like it's going to be a lot of extinction if you're not going to change anything. If you're going to leave it like that and try to just click for paw, not for head, because when she starts with her nose and the handler is withholding a click to get a paw, then you're going to get this, and then a paw and a click and a nose. So it's going to be hectic.
But that's where I think train the nose where it should go comes in, to not get that extinction. Because if rather than look at the nose where it's going, allow the nose to go in the wrong direction and then wait for the paw, and then wait for the nose to go to the right direction. If we stop the sequence earlier on, give the nose a proper starting point, click for the nose while it's in a decent position, and get the nose going in a decent position. And then maybe do one rep where you allow for the paw to come, and then the nose goes wherever. You just click for the beginning of the paw, and you sort of cross your fingers and hope for the best and hope the nose stays up. And then if you got a lot of nose in that one as well, you just go back to clicking for nose up again.
Uh-huh.
But it's gonna help a lot if the dog doesn't have to look for where the target is. So if the dog is stationary all the time, and the paw, it can really feel where the target is, so that it can speed up the process, but just moving its paw ever so slightly, that's going to help, of course.
Like what we did where you went in Krakow. You remember that with me as a dog, and
Yes.
like crossing the paws. And
Yes.
when
Exactly.
I didn't see a target. I saw a target first because it was a bit further. So I was doing this, and then Eva started to fade out the target. So she started to move it closer. And the moment that I stopped seeing it, I was like, okay, it's there. I know it's there because it was always there. And I was thinking that maybe using a completely different object, like with no history of those behavior, like an object that is not a target, that is something different to teach, like maybe.
And an object that also stays predictably in the same position as well. I think one of the things in that video as well is that it's a really clearly visible object, right? So it's a blue bowl and you can see it and it's on a black surface. So what I really liked about it is that the dog can just see it, right? There's no feeling about it's not small, stuff like that. But in getting that momentum where the dog isn't having to look for the object, it would help, I think, to have something almost like a ceramic water bowl that is upside down.
But according to what you just said, Eva, with keeping the dog in the position, for making it easy repetitions, could we just talk a bit about reinforcement, which type of treat we're using? Because I'm thinking if we have the dog laying down in front of the target, so it's easy to just move the paw. If we give a treat, quite naturally, a lot of dogs will do like this shortly. I don't know if it's a swallowing thing, but just shortly they're doing this. How about using a treat tube, like with liver pate? Because they normally put head up to swallow it. And if they put head down, it's to lick on their front legs. I don't know why they do that. They always lick on their front legs. But normally it's head up. So we could actually have the dog having head up while still enjoying some of the delicious liver pate or whatever it is, and still being able to touch the target while being still in the body. Could that be an idea?
Yes, I like that.
I have a question in the back of my mind. So before this conversation, what I would have probably gone for intuitively is transfer a paw target to the floor. Yeah. So, a hand, like a high five or, whatever, however we want to call it, to the floor on the same object. I would also have, I mean, the thing that struck me again is teach the target behind the fence. And reward over the fence, Eva, like you were saying. For me, that's the kind of physical arrangement type stuff that I would be thinking about. Is there a reason for us to choose the methods where we teach the position of the nose very clearly, compared to having an environment where the paw target is the only behavior that can happen, but we are not explicitly teaching what the rest of the body is doing?
You're probably going to have the same issue later with other behaviors otherwise, if it's a dog who does a lot of nose targeting. So you might as well try to see if you can separate the behaviors now, would be my idea from what you're saying. But
do we think that if you set up the target behind a fence and the dog, you fade the fence out over time, so the approximations that might make sense, tell me what you think, but the approximations for me that might make sense is to fade out that fence and to start bringing the feeding position closer, not so distinct, and also bringing the object further forward into the fence and so on. That would kind of be how I would see those approximations. Is there a place where that falls over? Is there a place where it's not, assuming you did the approximations correctly?
What about if you think of it as a concept? both for the dog and for the handler. Then it would be, we would anticipate that, like with other concepts, that once you've done it in a couple of different ways, it goes really quickly. It's going to be faster than building. It's going to be, you can do it with just a couple of repetitions.
Yes.
I think that would be the benefit. I don't see it as being a huge benefit in this moment of just doing the sort of shaping, capturing, no environmental alterations kind of thing. Yeah. It probably wouldn't be the fastest way. You would probably have a quicker way of just altering the environment. But then for the next time that 2 body parts aren't going where you want them to, or 3 body parts aren't going where you want them to, if we're going to do building constructions for every time that happens, we're going to spend a lot of time building. And maybe some of those times we don't need the buildings, we just need some. So for me, it's more a concept thing.
Yeah, plus it would cost
an idea about setup, to change setup. Let me toss it in before I forget. Okay, so we watched the video, and when dog lies, it got better. It got cleaner. And what I see wrong with that is that using paw in this setup, it's way harder than using a nose, because plus dog has to move his head forward, like with the nose touch, to leave the paw, to be able to leave the paw. So what I would change, what I saw is that we get better head position just by changing the setup, and that's because the handler and treats are above the dog. So what if the handler would stand up, and we got standing position for the dog without moving, and we'll head up because the handler is standing and treats are higher. And plus the paw target is easier because it's low. Dog has to do a little lift instead of this whole movement with nose with head movement to that. So we could just set it up like handler is standing and has this target before him, and dog is standing in front, and maybe that would help in making the paw target more possible.
Yeah, because it gives both a bit of a different starting point and a bit of a different reinforcement.
There's no coming back, because when she was coming back, then head was already down, and when she was stationary, head was up. So maybe by doing that, head would be up in the starting position, and we got better chance for paw movement than before, because it's easier, it's physically easier to move while
standing. So we can dissect just a paw movement from stand, but first we need to teach the stand.
I thought about it. That's the idea I had.
Cool. I had one more idea, which is like completely different, just random idea, that we could teach if the dog has already have a history with walking over cavalettes. So it could be that we have a cavalletti. This is a cavalletti, and I have to have a third hand. This is a target. This is cavalletti, and this is a dog. It's a very low cavalletti. So if the dog can sidestep, we can place the target next to cavalletti, and the dog will be stepping on the target. Stepping over cavalletti to target, and we're gonna get a paw movement, and the dog is not going to use his nose again, because it's hard to cross the cavalletti with your nose on the ground, right? So, and we can easily dissect this movement, so it would be easy to just get this over cavalletti, because it's like a physical barrier that the dog is used to crossing over, right?
Well, from that, could you also have a your teacher sides your teacher paw side step? So instead of going paws up, you go paw to the side. So, and you have like a little something raised, something that's like a wooden thing or something like that, and then you would get the side step movement, right?
No.
See, I think one of the things on my mind in all of this is if we watch the video, maybe it's just me, but the pace at which this dog works, right? Like she is throwing 5 things at you at once, right? Because she moves that fast. So, which for me is quite interesting, because I think when I work with my dog, or some dogs at the RSPCA, yes, but I'm not working on precision with those dogs, right? At the RSPCA for the most part. With my own, he moves slowly and his head is very high from the ground. So it's sort of, one of the things I was thinking about is the pace of the session. If there are foundation skills that we ought to be building to slow that session.
Like standing still with the head up.
Yeah.
Or exactly, like standing still with the head up. But do you think that this is a reasonable ethical thing to do, to say she's a dog who loves being busy, right? Who loves doing things, and I think she's beautiful for that. How do you set, is it a wise thing, is it a good aspiration to want to slow her pace down?
But I don't think we want to slow her. Oh,
no.
Sorry.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, go on.
Oh, Eva, go on.
No, I was just going where you're going. We don't want her to be slow.
No.
Okay.
No, we don't want to slow her down. We don't want to slow all the behaviors down. We just want her to separate them. So as Eva said before, teach her the concept of one body part being in one direction and another in another direction. So she would still be active. She just wouldn't be throwing 5 different behaviors at you at one time. But she would still be doing different behaviors, because she would be touching the paw target and keeping her head up. So it's still a behavior that she's doing. So
that's interesting.
We do not want to slow her down. We just want her to distinguish which behaviors pays off right now.
Which she would actually be able to do very well, because she's actually doing 5 things at once anyway.
Yes.
And can we use, for example, for teaching her to stand still, we could use like also environmental cues. Like I like with the dogs that like to move a lot, I don't try to teach them to stand just in front of me without anything in front, but I use platforms, for example. So yes. It's much easier sometimes to get to platforms, just one for front feet, the other one for hind limbs, and to teach, because this is going to be a little bit a new context, right? So and teach stand on those platforms and then transfer it, fade out from platforms. But absolutely not slowing down.
I don't know what I mean by slowing. I think what I mean by that is for the dog to be more, maybe what I just mean is for the dog to be more aware of that sequence. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the same thing. I don't want the dog to start moving slowly, because that's not who she is. We don't want to go there. For the kind of dog that is like explosive, does that make sense when I say that? What does that come across, the picture of what that dog might look like to you? Mm-hmm. How does one think about precision when you have a dog who is explosive?
Like, is it a good idea to just play beforehand with the dog, tire him a bit out, the movement will get slower, and then just start shaping if she still wants to?
One of the things that has been very interesting for me to learn through one of my students, another student, is actually use movement as a reinforcer as well, to teach the stillness. So this is a Cocker Spaniel, really loves doing stuff. She's gorgeous.
Pie?
Yes.
I love Pie.
Yes,
me too. Pie. We love Pie. Is gorgeous. But with her, what we were actually doing with the concept training, the foundations course, and this has worked really well with her, is you can, you're, in Sarah Owing's words, kind of sequence of green lights, right? So when you station, you move. You can move. So
it's
you
like
almost
start buttons.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but what has been very interesting is that her stationing has actually become calmer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying calmer, but there's less fidgeting, right? There's less movement. So her behavior is like super nice. And then she can go and do something that moves. Her next thing is to go and do something that moves. So it's been quite interesting for me to think about how you can work with dogs who love doing things, right?
Would that be because she got duration in the behavior suddenly?
In which behavior do you mean?
In the standing still or sitting still behavior that you said were reinforced by her being allowed to move?
Yeah. So we were working on building duration on the standing still behavior. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's interesting whether whether we feel that the dog is moving a bit sort of too fast or too slow. The recipe of alter your criteria and click while it's right and go increase the intensity of parts of the handler typically works.
Mm-hmm.
So just moving not at higher, well, it's going to be higher speed, but it's more deliberate, more the higher precision on part of the trainer, and not allowing for so long sequences of behaviors between each click and treat. So really go super fast with click and treat. It feels like you're going faster, but it helps the dog. You're splitting behaviors. You're only getting the stuff you want, because with a dog that goes all at once, they are putting 500 behaviors in within 3 seconds. And if you only wanted the first 3 of those 500, we have to click early, right? So,
and you also have to give them 497 other things to do, or you have to give them those very precise points, like what you're talking about. So you have to give them very clear other things, like your nose is here, your shoulders are here, your leg is pivoting, so things like that.
But if we were, sorry.
No, sorry, go on. Okay. Sorry.
I was just saying, if we were to look at the video in slow motion and picture a slower dog doing the same thing, going away, starting to go back, put the nose down, legs going in all different directions, eventually touching, we would say, whoa, you're way too late. We can't have all this garbage in between. The dog has done now a zillion things, and some of them were on the right path, but most of them were not. So we would, with a slow dog, we would say split. So let's just picture this dog in slow motion, and then we can split it properly. Otherwise, where would you go?
So basically with the fast dogs, I have one fast dog too, very fast, like faster than my shadow. And I would need to do this, well, I would call it machine gun clicking. It's probably not a politically correct word, but basically just click treat as fast as I can, just to actually stop him from offering any other behavior in between, or only very small behaviors, until I eventually will get him to stand still in the position I want, or stop fidgeting around and doing all that stuff.
At that point, in the beginning, it actually looks like non-contingent reinforcement, right? Because you're just feed, and then you're slowly just building out tiny slivers of pause.
Yeah, so not even a second to begin with.
Yeah, I have like with Gatsik, he's like that. He's like the biggest challenge for him and for me was to teach him standing still. And this was just by splitting criteria and making sure I get this like 1/3 of a second or even less, and click and treat, and then very slowly teaching him. And also I use a different types of delivery of reinforcement, which really helped. So because, for example, I can send you a video. Like I had a treat in my hand, and it was a cue for him to offer a different behavior. So I had to change where the treats were actually later. So first I was click and treat, so there was no time for him to offer. But then when I started to increase the duration, I actually had to move the location of the treats so they did not evoke a different behavior that I did not want it. So I had the treat somewhere up. And then after click, I was able to reach and deliver, but because then it was a cleaner antecedent arrangement for him, for what I wanted to shape, which was duration. But I think like first you need to be really fast as a handler to get at least this very tiny loop, and it can be just a millisecond, I think.
And it is the reason why it's not non-contingent really is that we set up, we set the dog's body up by, or the learner's body, whatever species, we set all the body parts up with the starting point we give with the previous reinforcer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's,
so you actually have, it's not non-contingent. Is it true what you're saying, that it's not non-contingent because the dog is orienting towards you? That is the behavior.
Wherever I want it to be. So if I want my dog here, standing up, feet in front, nose a little bit to the side, if I can end my reward here, then my reward ends, click, treat. The dog was physically there. He didn't move any body parts because they didn't have time to move, but it's still, they are all where I wanted them to be at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you are getting duration, hopefully.
Yeah, either duration or movement in the direction I want movement.
So now we're actually talking about almost a tangential topic, right? Which is pace of, working with dogs who have a certain speed of movement in natural, and you have almost, on the other hand, you have dogs where you want to amp them up as well, right? So, you kind of, it's a different topic in itself as well, isn't it? But I can see how it makes sense to see how that plays into teaching a paw target. Like actually all of that comes together like that.
But it's all about moving body parts.
Yes.
Yeah. And one thing just to add about, clicking that fast, it's also when, for me, for example, if I have a behavior on an offered loop, so let's say down from sit, right? My dog isn't sit, he goes into down, I click and deliver a treat, luring him back to sit. Then the moment I stop my treat magnet, he goes back to down. And then the moment when I want to add a cue, it's going to be, so I'm gonna want to add a stimulus control on the behavior. So I don't want him to go immediately after I take the treat into down. I want him to wait for the cue. First, I'm gonna click and treat very quickly for the sit. Yeah. And it's gonna be like click and treat, very like no break in between, because if I'm gonna do a break, he's gonna go immediately into down.
Yeah.
So it's helpful also with stimulus control if we are working on it.
But that would be actually a great way to work in stimulus control, where you're effectively like fading in that new behavior. You're giving something very clear, an alternative, which in this case is just standing still, and you go, okay, now's your cue to do that thing.
So we want duration in the waiting behavior, basically.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the waiting behavior as physical, all the body parts going where we want them to for a duration of time, and then if we envision, well, the time when we want the nose to stay up but the paw to move forward and go down, it's just the same thing in a sense. If we can start clicking and treating for the beginning of the movement cycle where the body parts are separate, and then it's just a matter of maybe when we want the two body parts to move in different directions, maybe we don't do that in the same session all the time because we're having so many criteria to look at. So maybe we just separate them out for some of the time, but we're still going to merge them together. So instead of this being all my body parts stay where they're at for 3 seconds, it's going to be within 1 second, they start here, the nose starts going there, and the paw starts going here.
So we want duration in the up behavior. So the dog goes forward with duration when on nose up, but paw doing something different. So it would be the same, just different behaviors.
Yeah. Did we solve it?
I think so. Did you know about the octopus that I don't know this story, but somebody else might. They sort of have their brain scattered all over the body, and the 8 arms can focus on 8 different things all at once.
No.
You
Is
can-
it true?
I don't know, but somewhere I read that you can have like different trainer for the different arms, and you can work them all
What?
simultaneously.
Oh,
Wow.
I don't know.
multitasking team.
I know what's going to be
Somebody's gonna figure this one out.
mascot. We're gonna have an octopus, and
Yeah.
each trainer is gonna work with a different arm. Awesome.
Yeah.
How does that work from a neurological point of view?
Yeah, that's we're leaving
That's
that.
what we
for
are not
you.
going to discuss today.
No. But now
Dr.
you've kind of
Vidya will-
opened you've literally taken like the can, gone,
Yes.
you know? Yes, that's it.
So now we'll all be searching for octopuses we can go train with.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Trainers Octopus. That's the name.
Yeah, and definitely multiple trainers courses at Tromplo for one octopus. Yeah, that's cool.
That seems efficient.
Okay, guys, I think we have to. We kind of summed up everything, so I think this is a good moment to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Yeah.
It was great. It was like first time we did it like 5 people. Awesome. Next
Yeah.
time.
Lovely seeing you all again.
It was
Yes.
awesome.
Okay, thank you guys so much, and see you on the next episode.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.